Okay, perfect. Well, I'd like to welcome Shmuel and thank him for coming over to the Australian Zoom. He ordinarily does the United States. Hi, Anne. He ordinarily does the United States Zoom, but because he's here coming to us next month, we thought we better bring him over to say hello. And of course, we always welcome Sondra. It's wonderful to see you today, Sondra.
Thank you.
We've come through to a new year, a new calendar year. Here's our friend from the UK. Hello, Lynn. And so I'd like to open with a mixture of scripture in our prayers. So all the Torah scholars here, please don't say that I've taken scripture out of its place, but we're going to pray because we're coming into a new calendar year, but we're coming into significant change in leadership. And so from Isaiah 43, here I am doing a new thing. Now it is springing up. Do you not know about it? I will surely make a way in the desert, rivers in the wasteland. And from Deuteronomy, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. And Psalm 18 says, the Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield, and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. So, Lord, we just pray that as we come out of the Biden administration and hopefully out of the Albanese leadership, we can come into the Trump and Dutton leadership over America, over Australia, and we can impact Israel to honor the Lord in the way that God loves Israel, that these two great nations will now honor Israel the way that she should be. Amen.
Okay, so thank you, Pam, for that lovely prayer, and so relevant to today and to what we're going to be talking about today. Everybody in Israel, as I'm sure many people around the world, are looking towards next week when President Donald Trump will be inaugurated as President of the United States for the second time. Under US law, by the way, this is the last time that he can be president. He has these next 4 years. Nobody can throw him out of office during these 4 years, and then it's finished. So from us in Israel, as we're looking towards this new presidency, we, of course, are looking back towards what we had this last 4 years and what happened before that when Trump was president the first time. And so, and there's a lot of anticipation, a lot of discussion. And so this is what we're going to be dedicating our meeting to today, how we in Israel are looking, and specifically in Judea and Samaria, how are we looking towards this new Trump administration? And Shmuel, as you noted, Pam, Shmuel's right now sitting in Ben Gurion Airport. He is on his way to Washington, D.C. as part of a delegation of leaders of Judea and Samaria that are going to Washington, D.C. to be there for events just prior to and around the inauguration. So without further ado, Shmuel, why don't you share your perspectives on the incoming Trump administration and tell us a little bit about what you personally will be doing in DC.
Okay, shalom everyone. First of all, I want to say it's a very interesting spot. I want to show you where I'm sitting. You will see it. You all will recognize it. See what I'm sitting? It's in the corner of the area of the restaurants. Yeah, kosher McDonald's, only here in Israel. And right here, you can see some, in the window, some airplanes. I'll, just a second, bring it back to me. And I'll say that this spot, somebody once told me, a friend told me, that it's an interesting spot. For Israelis, it's one of their most favorite spots because they're going to travel, they're going to enjoy. That's where they're going to go out. But for people from outside of Israel traveling back to their home, it's one of the saddest places. People are sitting here and they say, oh no, the vacation is finished, the visit is finished. So how come a spot can be so different to two groups. I think in many ways that's exactly a symbolic idea to explain the situation that we are facing right now as we're going to Washington D.C. Donald Trump, there's no doubts about it, was the most interesting president ever. It was always a surprise with this guy. You didn't know what to expect. You didn't know what to wait. What's the next surprise? What's going to be the next remark he's going to do, and what funny thing is going to happen in the next meeting he's going to have. I remember like Angela Merkel, one of the meetings, he gave her faces, he didn't want to shake her hand. Every time there's drama with this guy. And for many people, there were a lot of questions and doubts of how this person who's basically, it's a joker. You don't know what the way it's going to happen. And in the first 4 years, he proved to be a friend of Israel. He proved it over and over again with the Golan Heights, with Jerusalem, with moving the embassy. The fact is that in the first 4 years, he proved to be a friend, and he said it in his voice in one of the elections rally. The reason I care and I do everything for Israel is because of my evangelical Christian voters. Let's not be mistaken. That's the main reason of why this person is doing what he's doing. We felt it, especially in this election, even in a stronger note, because it felt like if you went down into the rabbit hole of this election, there were two movements. There was the evangelical Christian movement, and there was the
We lost you, Shmuel. Shmuel, do you hear us? It sounds like he's had an internet interruption. I don't hear you, Pam.
He's frozen passionately.
Now he has a black screen for me.
Ah,
Oh, wow. Okay.
yes.
So, okay, for those of you who joined a few minutes late, just to bring you up to date where we are, Shmuel is sitting in Ben Gurion Airport. He's about to get on a plane to go to the States to be there as part of a delegation of leaders of Judea and Samaria for events surrounding the inauguration of President Trump. And so he was just now sharing his perspectives on why Trump is why his administration is so important. Oh, I see he's coming in again. Let's see if we can get him reconnected and he'll be able to continue. Shmuel, are you with us?
yes, I don't know what happened.
You
Sorry.
froze. Okay.
I was just disconnected. So I'm going back to the point, and I'm saying we feel that there's a great opportunity here, and we need to take advantage of the situation and to try to best improve the status of Judea and Samaria. And I want to point out three main topics. The first topic, which is the right now, okay, is how we are ending the story of the war that is being ongoing from the 7th of October. And I would put it this way, friends, as I'm sitting here around me, there's one topic. There is a deal being made as we speak right now in Qatar. And Sandra is going to elaborate, I'm sure, later about it. And I'm going to say that there's a lot of question marks if it's the right deal to do. And unfortunately, it looks like after a year and a half of war, we would assume we would have a better terms for this deal, but it's not the case. And a lot of the things that Hamas was in control before the 7th of October will continue to be under their control. It's a very delicate situation. And I think putting Trump in a position that he's going to start next week, and he said in a very precise way, you need to close a deal, the hostages to go back to their homes. And if not, it's going to be, what did you say? I remember
All hell will break loose.
all hell was going to break loose. It's a crucial moment. And there's a lot of people that are going there to try to influence, talk to his ears, and to explain what's the situation now and how it's supposed to end. The second element, which is a deeper element, is to say this: Israel, and it's not even Judea and Samaria, Israel was always a bipartisan agreement. Israel was always a friend of America, regardless if you were a Democrat and or a Republican. And for some reason, right, of course, we know what's the reason. The people behind the scenes in the last 4 years, especially in this war, we saw it many times, that America didn't stood with Israel the way it stood with a lot of nice words, but in reality, there was a lot of pressure. You remember even the amount of negotiation that Israel had with gear that was supposed to come to Israel, and they hold it. I remember, I remember once Prime Minister Netanyahu had to release a video. He released a video in English saying to the American people, we need equipment, and it's being owned by people of your government or people of your Congress. This is an unheard of situation. America was always, we were allies, and it was regardless who was there. And I think this is something that needs to be changed, and it's something that needs to be moved and shaped there. I don't know how it happened. The Democrats movement took a strong hit to the left, and there are a lot of younger voices that are very pro-Palestinians, and the way they take it to the wider perspective of the movement, it's something that needs to be balanced a bit more. And I think for Judea and Samaria, the most important thing, the obvious thing that everybody is thinking about is sovereignty. And you remember, even in the time of the first presidency, Donald Trump already had agreed to a certain map. If you remember, he had organized already a map of main communities getting together. There were different holds of how he's going to just make it happen. Jared Kushner was the leader on that, was part of the Abraham Accord as well. And there was a lot of pressure. In the last minute, it fell apart. So right now, what we're looking at a situation where I think the stars had aligned in really in a way that it can really change. He brought people to the administration that are, I'll put it this way, I wish they were members of the government in Israel with how much they're far right, from Mike Huckabee, the next ambassador to Israel, to people that are really, every person, one after another. And forgive me for not managing the name right now. It was unbelievable. And I remember it was like the lottery draw, right? There's like a number 15. Yes, everybody was shouting, it's good for us. And then another number, yes, it's good. And I think this positive notion and the fact that he's also going to control the houses, and the fact that, as Sondra just said, and I think that's a very strong psychological important note, when he knows it's his last election, he can go and do whatever he wants, because really it can be stopped, and it cannot be even judged. Or let's put it this way, only history will judge him. And we know that he said many, many times, I want to make a deal. I want to make big moves. I want to make changes. And I really feel that all those, elements put it together, and we're looking at one of the biggest opportunities Judea and Samaria had and Israel had to change the balance in the Middle East. But as I'm saying that, there's two elements to say on the other perspective. Number one, the biggest target right now, and I think that's supposed to be maybe the first thing he's going to do. I heard many interviews with President Trump before he was elected, And he uses the term, the first day I'm going to the office, that's what I'm going to do. And he said it about like a million things. I don't know what he's going to decide to do. But I think one of the top in the list, of course, is the story of Iran. And when you think about it, and it like gives me the chills, because think of the situation right now in the Middle East and how many of the proxies of Iran has fallen down or weakened to the situation that really there's not enough. There's like not a lot to do to bring Iran to their knees. And I think that's really something to take into consideration, given the fact, again, this is like the Joker persona he had. He was targeted by Iran personally in one of the attempts to assassinate him during the election. I am sure that he won't let it fly. And I know that he's going to do something. Will he attack himself? Will he allow Israel to attack? I don't know. But I really think Iran could be something that's going to be changed in the near future. And I'm super excited about that. I always remember, thinking about 7th of October, how we were afraid from so many elements, right? Lebanon, Syria, and Iran, who's going to attack us first? One after another, they fell down. And the second thing that I want to say, in contrast to everything I just said now, and this is like a Torah teaching. Pam, it's for you, because you mentioned Torah teaching. We cannot avoid it. This week, the last week parasha was my bar mitzvah parasha. And that was the parasha I read 20-something years ago in my bar mitzvah. And I remember it very strong. And yet, every time I read it, I understand new things. And I've noticed something after actually with learning with my kids. The first part of the parasha, there's like a strong request of Jacob to be buried in Israel. And he goes to Joseph to ask him, and he asks him to bury him in Israel, and he also to swear that he's going to bury him in Israel. You remember this part. And when you ask yourself, why does he go only to Joseph? The basic understanding, and that's what my daughter told me as well, because he's in charge. He's the second in command of Egypt. He has the power. He has the abilities. Okay. For some reason, if you go after that, after the blessings to his the tribes, he goes and he asks again from all of the tribes to bury him in Israel. And he gave this long lecture that Abraham bought the land. Everybody was buried there. I want to be buried there as well. And I was doubting, why does he ask it twice? You already asked it from Joseph, and he's going to be the one that's going to make it happen. Why do you need to go and ask it from the people? I think there's one thing that we need to remember. With all this trip, with everything we have to do with saying with Trump, with all the hopes and desires, we like to be in a place that we can whisper in the ears of the important people that change needs to be made. So Joseph, in that way, is Donald Trump. We make an effort to go and ask him to help us, to be in our side, to whisper in his ears, and to hope that he's going to help us when needed. But we shouldn't forget. And I think this is what Jacob's trying to tell us. We shouldn't forget the people, the tribes, just the grassroots movement of millions and millions of friends around the world who need to know what we're doing, what we're achieving, and what we're hoping for, and what we're praying for. Yes, it's important to go to the people who are making the decision, but if we won't have the movement of people believing in this notion, in these ideas, we won't achieve anything and we won't progress anything. Jacob came to the brothers and to the tribes because you don't know what's going to happen with Joseph. Maybe Pharaoh will say no. Maybe he's going to drop dead. Who knows what's going to happen? You need to have a core belief in the people. And we need to believe one thing, and I'm sure all of you understand that. With all the hope and dreams and prayers for Donald Trump, there's only one source of truth we're praying and we're hoping for, and this is God. So yes, we're going in a delegations and we're going to try to support what we're doing, and we're going to pressure and we're going to do everything we can in our possession here with human being with Donald Trump, but we won't forget who is in charge. We won't forget who is making the shots. And we won't forget how the God of Israel, with Donald Trump, with anybody else that's going to come and go, he will always going to put us on the track to the right things that we need to have to our nation. So that's my core belief for everything I'm going to go through. And I really hope that God is going to put to me and all the other people good words for the people we're going to meet. We're going to see our hearts. They're going to understand what we're doing, and they will connect. And we really hope for huge changes in the region, in Judea and Samaria, and all throughout Israel. And the last thing I'm going to say is, just like going to Joseph and ask Donald Trump, the people are you guys. So after I'm going to ask Trump what I'm going to ask, let's come to Australia. And it's something to be in mind that hopefully in February, I'm going to see you guys and we're going to talk and we're going to connect and we're going to be together with the vision for Israel. That's my message from El Al Airport. Shalom.
Thank you, Shmuel. Shmuel, I just want to just make a, hone in on one thing that I want to make clear to everybody, that amongst the people that you will be meeting personally, if I understand correctly, are Christian leaders in the United States who are the people who are seen to be amongst the most influential, not only in having gotten Trump elected, but in the Republican Party as a whole. And, that's very key. And if I would translate that to Australia, I know it's a very different political situation, but our hope and dream would be, and I think Shmuel's trip is a very big part of that, that the Christian voice, together with any voice out there in Australia, Jewish and otherwise, who is pro-Israel, can become an important influence in Australian politics as well. And that's something also that you guys can think about in planning to be at Shmuel's talks, what you can then do with the information you're going to get from Shmuel, whose ear you're going to be able to whisper into.
I agree. And I would say that everything started with what we say, that Donald Trump owes the people who voted him everything. And if you are voting for somebody, he works for you. It looks like he is the high politician, but in the end of the day, the influence of the people is very crucial. And we need to say that what we're going to do there in Washington, D.C. is meeting pastors, meeting politicians. And one of the main events would be they're opening an official Judea and Samaria caucus in the Congress, which is the first time ever such a thing happens. And it's an exciting thing. I am going to update on Telegram and on Instagram. And I'm sure we're going to also send an email about it, about like photos, images, and to see what's happening there. It is a very exciting moment for all of us. And yes, we're praying that that only good is going to happen from it. I'm going to have very cold weather there. So yeah, I hope it's going to be nice and cozy somewhere. And I'm going to run to my flight. So I wish you all the best and you're in good hands. And thank you, Pam, and thank you, Sondra, and thank you, everybody. And I'll see you soon in Australia.
Safe
Bye.
Journeys.
Thank you.
All the best, Shmuel. All the very best.
Thank you, Pam. Bye.
Okay, so that was a great... Pam, I don't hear you.
Yes, Sondra, could you just tell us again, what did Shmuel say about this Judea caucus in the USA? Could you just...
Okay, yes. So if you're familiar with the idea of a parliamentary caucus, it works similar with the congressional caucus. In America, there are two houses of Congress, the Senate and the Congress. And a caucus is usually a group of the members themselves. They're congressmen, okay, or senators, but in this case, congressmen, that they themselves ally themselves with a caucus to promote a certain principle or idea, okay? So it's not external lobbyists. it is members of the Congress themselves. And so they're launching now, just before the inauguration, a Judea and Samaria caucus where they already have members of Congress signed up and committed to promote Judea and Samaria. We have, for example, I believe a senator, if I'm not mistaken, who has already said that they're going to put forth a policy not to use the word West Bank, but to use the word Judea and Samaria instead. Okay, so this you could say is just small, kind of thing, but it's very, very significant. And so these will be people that at the very first, if there are issues going on in Israel that have to do with Judea and Samaria, we can go to these people, and then they, who are part of the political system, can then use their political power within the Congress, as well as when talking to the president, to help us. It's just one more way to get our goals, put forward before the political system in America.
That sounds tremendous. Thank you, Sondra.
With pleasure. Now, there are already, some of you may have heard of the congressional or the parliamentary Israel Allies caucuses that have been set up all over the world. And that is something that is in connection with the Knesset. And that's very good. And they do good things. But they've never focused on Judea and Samaria because by definition, they're going to try to represent a fair consensus within the Knesset. And then it's just pro-Israel. So this is the next step. Okay, so we already have this idea of activism for Israel in these places, but this is the first time it's specifically about Judea and Samaria. So it is very exciting. Anyway, so I just want to kind of add some things to what Shmuel was talking about with regard to Trump and in general. So yes, Shmuel mentioned that right as we speak, news has it that they are putting the final touches on a hostage deal. And it's very, very controversial. We've known for a long time. Look, initially when October 7th and the hostages were taken, very shortly after that, the military went into Gaza. And it was the prayer of all of us that they would just find the hostages, release them, and bring them home. And unfortunately, there were only a few, there were some that were released that way, but only a few. There were a lot that were released in the first hostage deal that happened over a year ago. And since then, there has not been a deal. And one of the problems is that the Hamas is insisting that we end the war. Now, this current deal that we're talking about is what they call a staged deal, which is something that in and itself is controversial because the fear is they're talking about initially releasing 32 or 33 hostages with no obligation on their part that they will all be alive. Some alive and some dead. Hamas has not even submitted a list of names of who they're going to be, who's in the deal and whether they're alive or dead. This is part of the thing that's sticking this. And so then what, so right now there are 98 hostages, either dead or alive in Gaza. And so the question is, what happens? And there's a fear that those who are released first, well, maybe that'll work, but then things will fall apart. And then it'll be even harder to get the rest of them released. So there's also a push here to have a deal to release all of them. And then the question is, do you then have to promise to stop the war? As it is, the staged release of the hostages are parallel to a staged withdrawal of Israel from Gaza, which is also very problematic. Not that we would all love to end the war yesterday. And just in this past week, we have had so many, I think it's more than 10 soldiers have fallen just in the last few days. And it's terrible. It's terrible. And you are in Gaza, they're fighting there, and they're fighting in places they have fought already for over a year. And they have destroyed all of the Hamas military infrastructure. They have destroyed the commanders, and yet they're still Hamas fighters. And why are there still Hamas fighters? Because they're acting as guerrillas. They still have that, they don't need leaders, they're finding their weapons, they're doing what they want, and there's still tunnels. No matter how many hundreds of kilometers of tunnels we have destroyed, there's still more. And there's no way that we're going to be able to destroy them all. And of course, one of the fears is there's certain places where it is suspected that there are hostages being held in those tunnels. And so you're not going to bomb those tunnels. And it's a very, very difficult situation. So I would say there is today much more of an openness on the part of Israelis to have the IDF pull out if we can get all the hostages back, but not an obligation to end the war, okay? And this is the big sticking point. For as long as Biden was president, we knew, and what Hamas was asking for was American guarantees that we didn't go back. And that was an impossible situation. The IDF itself is saying, if they pull out, and I don't think they're thinking of pulling out of all Gaza, but let's say keeping a perimeter or whatever, the first thing, the first attack, the first, missile, whatever, we go back in, right? We go back in, we finish the job. If our hostages are already out, it'll be much easier to, we could bomb them from the air, we could go in, we can do whatever. The problem was with Biden, remember Biden? What did Biden say? Don't. And Trump recently was making fun of Biden when they said, so when you say, Mr. Trump, when you say all hell's breaking loose, what exactly do you mean by that? Trump says, it's not going to just be don't. Excuse me. So we all had to laugh because basically, from our perspective, Biden looks like a wimp. At best. Anyway, so that's the situation. The hope is, even if, and again, there are people who are against the deal. There are people, it's very difficult though, because people are dying. The hostages are dying. They're being killed or they're dying, and we don't know how many are surviving. And it's a terrible open wound in Israeli society. Not just that your heart goes out for these people, but until these people are brought back, there's too much trauma in Israeli society that is preventing everybody from coming together in a solid front as much as we could be, okay? On the other hand, you've got to ensure that you are not going to open yourselves up to another October 7th. And my sense is that with Trump at the helm, we feel like first of all, if Hamas plays games and doesn't release them all, we will have all the backing in the world to do whatever it is we feel like doing, okay, in Gaza. And that's a big, big help, because I think Netanyahu is more willing to take a risk with this deal because he is confident that if he has to then do things, escalate the war against Gaza, he will have U.S. backing. Whereas under Biden, we had an arms embargo. And that makes a huge difference in how we're going to go forward. But again, nobody knows for sure, all right? And I will give you an example. Trump is saying on every stage possible, if the hostages don't come home before I take office, all hell will break loose. Then he talks about the deal that is happening now, and he hopes the deal goes through. Well, he's very involved in this deal. In fact, now more than the Biden people, the Trump people are involved in negotiating this deal, okay? And so they very much want the deal to go through. They're pressuring Hamas, they're pressuring Qatar, I think, and Egypt more than they ever did before, which was a big problem with the Biden administration. They had ways to pressure that they didn't use. But the question is also, what does that mean? If we sign a deal that over the next 2 months, hostages will be released, or even 3 months, well, that's not the day that Trump comes into office. And yet, if that's a part of a deal that he was in favor of, how is he going to respond to that deal? Okay, we don't know. Will he back us at the least bit of an infraction? Okay. Again, we don't know the details. We don't know if the deal's really a ceasefire. Now, just to let you know what's going on around us, okay? Last week, Hamas suddenly figured out how to fire rockets again. And we're firing rockets at Israel. Hamas. So you think, wait, we thought we got rid of all those rocket launchers. Well, they're still there. Some of them, of course, not nearly the kind of capabilities. So these are just some of the issues that we're dealing with. And as you can imagine, it is difficult. Okay, that's that end of the Trump thing. But I think from our perspective in Judea and Samaria, We are hoping that Trump will really look favorably on this whole idea of changing everything. I think when we look at Israel today, after October 7th, more and more people in Israel, I don't think anybody in Israel today believes in a two-state solution. Even the people who did believe in it before October 7th, after October 7th, they just think it's ridiculous, okay? And nobody wants the Palestinian Authority to be involved in Gaza. And in fact, when people even raise that suggestion, they are careful to say, oh, not the real Palestinian Authority. We're going to have a different Palestinian Authority. I mean, I don't trust those words. I think it's garbage. It's certainly not anything that we can agree to. But it shows you that even people who were once in favor of the Palestinian Authority realize that the Palestinian Authority, as we know it today, is bankrupt. I don't mean bankrupt financially, but bankrupt in any kind of authority or legitimacy. And these are the kinds of issues that we have to continue to put forward. No to a two-state solution, no to the Palestinian Authority. We have to make sure people understand, again, who are innocent civilians. There are not too many of them. And very important, one of the issues that we're hoping will change in Gaza, but can also have effects in Judea and Samaria, is that, the humanitarian aid, which is such a farce. The world is accusing Israel of starving the Palestinians, and yet Israel's being pressured to bring in more tons of food than has ever been brought into Gaza. What happens with that food is that the Hamas takes it over, and it is a result of selling that food to the poor people in Gaza at ridiculous prices, higher prices than you pay in Australia. Okay, they're using that money to continue arming against Israel. So you want to know why we have missiles that flew last week? It's because Israel is sending in humanitarian aid. Okay, so that's another place where we feel like Israel, nobody wants to continue sending that humanitarian aid. That was only continued because of pressure from the US that's saying, if you don't send this aid in, you're not going to get any weapons. All right, so that's another thing we hope will change. One very significant thing that has changed in Israel is that we are now, the military in Israel is doubling down on signing contracts with our local military industries to provide the heavy ammunition that was provided until now by the United States. And so more and more, we are also becoming much more independent, because as much as America is a friend, we cannot allow ourselves to be in a situation where another country will say to us, stop fighting, when we know we're fighting for our lives, for our very lives. Okay, so that's the general. Now, how does this all affect Judea and Samaria? So as much as Shmuel mentioned, Hamas and similar organizations are supported by Iran. They're Iran proxies. The whole situation with Iran is severely weakened because Hezbollah is almost gone. Hamas is severely weakened. Assad is gone. So we have this whole, a vacuum in a way, which creates enormous opportunities. In Judea and Samaria, however, Hamas is quite alive and kicking. And just last week was a horrific terrorist attack by terrible terrorists just in my neighborhood. And I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. But it is very, very important here in Judea and Samaria, and we see it happening, and we hope it will continue to happen, that the IDF realized and the government of Israel realized that the next front is Judea and Samaria, not the next one. It's already with us today. We have a serious situation where even if Hamas were to be defeated in Gaza, if Hamas is still active and doing things and sending terrorist attacks, etc., in Judea and Samaria, that's part of the same, axis of evil, if you will, that has to be destroyed. Okay, and so it's very, very important, regardless of how this hostage deal happens, and I do hope all the hostages will come home very, very soon. I hope we then see this as an opportunity, us with the United States, to revamp the entire Middle East, which Trump says he wants to do. What is my vision for that? Gaza we have to continue working to get rid of Hamas. And there's, I don't want to go into details. There's a lot of things that can be done, but it has to be done, and it needs to have support. Not just, this cannot just be Israel's responsibility. This needs to have support from all normal countries that understand the dangers of Hamas. That's number one. Number two, Judea and Samaria. If we were to extend sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, we would be sending a very clear message that this is not for sale. This is not part of a deal, okay? And if you want to negotiate about anything, Mr. and Mrs. Palestinian in Judea and Samaria, it is how good your lives will be. If you work with us in Israel, if you want to become proud citizens and take part in building a better life for yourselves, for your communities, etc., we are your partners. But if you want to, continue killing and murdering and destroying, we will chase you, we will kill you, we will do whatever needs to be done. And if Israel does this under the framework of sovereignty, we are able to put forth both a serious threat as well as serious hope for the Palestinians. And this is something that very few people envision, understand. I highly recommend a book that was recently written by former U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, called One Jewish State. And I think he puts forward this idea very, very well. Now, this idea is not a popular idea. I can just tell you that I was recently interviewed on the BBC for a piece on how does Israel, or how did the so-called settlers, how are we looking forward to Trump? And it was very edited. I mean, they gave me my say, but of course they made sure to, in the pre and after comments, they made it look like I'm supporting, horrible people, that we steal Arab land and we don't care about Arabs. When I put this forward to the BBC as well, the only part they put into the piece was, well, if the Arabs don't like sovereignty, they can leave. Although I made it very clear to say I'm not throwing them out. What they did not put into the piece was that sovereignty could actually give enormous opportunities for the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. Be that as it may, it was an interesting experience, because then I got enormous hate mail afterwards, people calling me Nazis and whatever. I don't usually get mail like that, but it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Anyway, so that is more or less the perspective on how we see Trump and how we see our opportunities here. Just one more thing I wanted to mention before we open for some Q&A is that just to give you a perspective, Shmuel mentioned Iran, and clearly that is a huge threat, and we are very much hoping that Israel will do what needs to be done to really just remove the nuclear threat that Iran poses today and deal enough of a blow to it so that it has to stop supporting the few proxies it has left. One of the proxies it has left is the Houthis in Yemen. I have to tell you, before October 7th, who paid attention to the Houthis? Really, they would talk about these rebels in Yemen, and, most of us, I'm sure, when you think of Yemen, you think of this desert country. I mean, riding around on camels, and, who are they? What does it matter? What's going on there? And suddenly you see that these people are armed with very sophisticated weapons, surface to air missiles, etc., ground to air missiles, and all kinds of things, and these drones, armed drones, and they're sending over to Israel. And the drones are very hard to shoot down. And I can tell you that last night at 3 a.m, there were sirens all over Israel. Thank God we didn't have any sirens in my particular neighborhood, but there were sirens in the Jordan Valley, in northern Samaria, in the central part of Israel, near Jerusalem, Beit Shemesh, all kinds of areas near the coast. I mean, so many parts of Israel had sirens at 3 a.m. because of a missile that was launched towards Israel. And thank God it ended up being shot down, intercepted. and nobody was hurt. But 3 a.m, my mother, who is 91 years old, had a siren at 3 a.m, and she gets up and, putters over to her shelter. And this is insane. And this is life. And this is terrible. So this is something that, yeah, I'll end this with this. It's kind of a joke, but this really, I would say, says so much of what we're dealing with these people, both with the Houthis and with Hamas and with all the rest. Normally, someone said this on TV. I thought it was hilarious. Normally, you would say, "Oh, somebody's going to do that. We're going to bomb them back to the Stone Age," right? That's what you want to do. Bomb them back to the Stone Age. There's only one problem. They're already in the Stone Age. The Houthis are so backward in terms of how they're living. Their standard of living is so low, literally riding around in camels in the desert. And where they're putting their money is in these sophisticated weapons. Are they putting their money in homes, in education, in better water supply for the people? Nothing. Look at Gaza today. All of my children and my relatives who have been serving in Gaza, when they come out, they say it is all rubble. We have absolutely destroyed Gaza. And yet they're still there. And so this is the most difficult issue that we're dealing with. How do you bomb someone back to the Stone Age that is already in the Stone Age and is not at all a deterrence against destroying people? They have such hatred, such evil, such poison that I don't, deterrence in the normal way just doesn't work. And let's hope that with the advent of this new Trump administration and with the continued strength of the Israeli government and the Israeli people, we will at the very least persist. It's not going to be an easy end. This will probably go on at some level for a long time, but we dare not give in because we cannot afford to have these horrible, horrible people, these Hamas people and all their friends. We cannot afford to let them win. It is life or death. We have no choices. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. And Shmuel, and love to hear your questions. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A, if you like.
Thank you, Sondra. Any questions? Yes, Anne's got a question. That wouldn't be our Zoom without Anne.
Sorry, I couldn't find the button. I'm looking at the button. I thought, where's the little hand button gone? Oh, Sondra, look, yeah, look, from what we're seeing, the sovereignty of Judea and Samaria seems to be critical. That it seems to be the Palestinians, the only thing they understand is when it's about land. They don't care about people. It's like they couldn't care less about people. All they care about is the land. They want Israel and they want the Jews wiped out so they can just take land. So from what I understand, the sovereignty issue in Judea and Samaria is critical. And is this so when Shmuel's in America, like now at the moment, is this something that he can be letting them know, and sharing that with them? Is it the name of the thing is the name of the group of men that are between Congress and the I forget the name anyway, but is that something that they can do? The
caucus. You mean the caucus?
That's it. Yes. Caucus.
Yeah, definitely. That is definitely the agenda, or one of the agendas of the caucus, as I understand it, to move towards sovereignty in Judea and Samaria. And I think what you're saying is absolutely true. One of the things that have been put forward as one way of deterrence against these people that are already in the Stone Age is by taking away land. And that's why one of the things Israel is very, very important for Israel to retain at least some sort of perimeter of land, real land, both in Gaza and in Lebanon, and maybe even Syria, that we hold on to. I mean, you attacked us tough, you lost. And sovereignty, of course, will do that in a bigger way, because once you apply sovereignty, you're saying it's not just that we're physically there today, which we are, but we're also legally there, and it's a permanent thing. So I agree with you, Anne. It is a very critical thing.
Thank you, Anne. Lynn?
Two things, really. One, can you ask the caucuses to also ask them to stop using the word Palestinian, because there's no such thing as a Palestinian. Why don't they say Arabs? Because there's no place called Palestine, is there? And the second thing is, having heard some of the details of this supposed deal, it's beyond belief that Israel, to me, that will consider it, when you consider the number of prisoners, murderers that are going to be let loose. When we look at Gilead Shalit, I think it was 1,027, and they went on to form Hamas. I mean, personally, if all these prisoners were let live, I think it's 50 prisoners, isn't it, for one person? If they were all let loose, I don't think I'd want to stay in Israel. If I was you, I'd feel pretty scared to think of all men being on the loose, plotting things in future.
I think those are very good points. First of all, as far as Palestinian, I think that the fight to stop using Palestinian is one we have lost. And I do believe, though, that one way to modify that is to refer to them as Palestinian Arabs, as opposed to Palestinian, because then you turn Palestinian back into what it really is, a geographical location. There's no question that there is no Palestinian nation in the sense of a place that is identified by a common culture, common history, common language. All of that is no different from the Arab people as a whole. So yes, but if you say Palestinian Arabs, at least it refers to a certain type of Arab that share a certain identity, and that identity is really a negative identity. It's the people who ended up being from the place that became Israel, and the people who want to destroy Israel. That's more or less who they are. With regard to the hostage deal and the terrible price, there's no question, everything you're saying is absolutely correct, but we have a huge problem. Every single day, we are looking at the faces of the families of these hostages every single day. And it is heartbreaking. And that's something about Israel that I don't know is the same in other countries. There's a personal connectedness that you have with these people, even though you don't know them personally. And almost all of us know somebody who knows somebody who's a family of a hostage. So it's very, very difficult to keep that distance. And I think Netanyahu was being very tough and keeping that distance for a very long time. The problem is we are in a situation now that we're a little bit bogged down in Gaza. Yeah. We're not getting major, I mean, yes, we're accomplishing all the time, but if you look at it from an overall strategic level, we are not, the game changer to a certain extent was done. What we need to go beyond this, the absolute, destruction of Hamas hasn't happened. And there is becoming much more of division in society. Right. And so the feeling is, if we're going to have to go back into Gaza, there's no question about it. That nobody says this is kumbaya and peace. Nobody. So the question is, does it pay also to give the soldiers a rest? People are in reserve for months and months at a time. Do we need this also to recruit, to rest, to do a little healing in the nation, and then go back and get those Gaza bastards, excuse my language? Yeah, it's okay. And so I think it's coming from that perspective. I always dream, and I know it's not possible, but I dream that what we need to do is when we release these guys, and they're not releasing them in Israel, they're either to Gaza and some of them will be abroad somewhere else. But I'd love to see, put a chip in each of them. And as soon as, release them, just knock them off. And, I don't know we're going to do that, but whatever. Anyway. Off.
Well, after the pager incident, anything could be happening.
Exactly.
So, Marion. Hello, Marion.
Hello there.
Hi, Pam. Hi, Sondra.
Hi, Marion.
I'm just wondering, I've often said to people, if the people of Gaza travel, what passport do they carry? What is their identification in a passport? Gaza, is it a state? Is it a...
No, it's a very good question.
And also, people get called Palestinian, and I say, but there's no Palestinian country. You can't carry a visa, or you can't carry a passport that says you're a Palestinian.
Okay, so this is a little complicated. Unfortunately, there are some countries who have recognized Palestine, and therefore they do have, the Palestinian Authority has issued some kind of, I don't know if it's a passport or some kind of a travel document, some kind of travel document that they have, and it's recognized. It's a state that isn't a state, you know, and
That's
they
right.
don't really have citizenship. But in Gaza, it's even different because the Palestinian Authority doesn't rule in Gaza. Hamas got rid of them, and Hamas certainly isn't issuing passports. They don't issue food. They don't issue anything. So, you know, it is a much more complicated situation when we're talking about the people in Gaza. They really technically are not citizens anywhere.
They are.
And I would love for them to be citizens somewhere else. Now, you know, I read, by the way, somebody wrote from Australia that, you know, we want to make sure that Australia does not accept Gazans. And I would love for you to, yes, accept them. Take them off. You have such a large country. Now, I realize you don't want them, okay? But I don't want them either. So that's the problem, by the way. You know, the natural thing, if you look at, for example, what happened in the Russia-Ukraine war, and Russia invaded Ukraine, and there was all these refugees, right? And where did they go? They ran to the neighboring countries. They ran to Poland, they ran to Germany, they ran to Moldova, all these places, right? And all these countries opened their doors, as you always do, because it's what you do for refugees from war. And Egypt closed its doors. And this is one of the problems, because at the beginning of the war, so all these people, they just wanted to run. It was not a, you know, ideological thing. Let's get us out of here. You know, they were trying to run, and Egypt wouldn't let them in. And you know why Egypt didn't let them in? Because they don't want them. And so I'm saying, well, just because you don't want them, how come I have to have them?
I remember after one of the wars down in Gaza years back, I happened upon an IDF lady, young girl, you know, up at the Jerusalem bus stop. She was just sitting there reading a book, and I thought I'll sit down and have a chat. And she told me she was down on the border because at that time, for some reason, Hamas, whoever the ruling party was at the time, were saying to the Gazans, if you want to leave, you can leave. This is a few wars back.
Right.
And this young, innocent IDF girl said to me, they were coming out with so many different passport identifications. She said, we had to put up more tables. So, you know, they thought they'd all handle it by one person, you know, like on a border check. And she said there were so many different passport identifications. So, you know, I think the world thinks that there's a passport carrying people as Gazans or, you know, Palestinians, but it's not the fact. All
Well, people don't want them. If there was some way of knowing that the people you were taking in were really good people and really just fleeing from war, then if everybody would want them.
The Arab countries,
it's very hard to know who's who.
The other question, it's just a fact that's quite obvious to some who understand what's going on, but the rest of the world are just a bit oblivious to the fact sometimes, which, you know, they've still got refugee camps in Jordan because they don't want to allow those people to become part of their country. So the other question is, with the sovereignty, what's wrong with the Knesset? While you're struggling, and I just heard this week of all the army guys who had to go in and dismantle a community. And we know what the Arabs are doing. They're just building wherever they want and no one's stopping them. And now here comes, you know, this has got another issue about passion in the Knesset together about getting their sovereignty and letting the Jewish people build where they're allowed to build.
Yeah, well, that's all a whole different issue. anyway, I really have to end and go. I just want to add with one request. I wanted to talk about more about this, but I didn't have a chance, about the terrorist attack that happened last week. 3 people were murdered. One, Elad Finkelstein, grew up in this community. Our community, our family is full of people who knew him, knew his brothers. We're friendly with his parents, and they've just gotten up from their week of mourning. And the 2 women from Kedumim, Rachel and Eliza, also, I know friends, dear friends of theirs. So remember them in your prayers, and remember their families who are hurting deeply. And even as we're talking at this level of hostage deals and Trump and all that, there are just still people every single day. The families, 5 soldiers were killed yesterday, their families who are burying them today. Keep all these people in your prayers. We are a nation full of hurting people. And God needs to help us not just win this war, but bring comfort to all of us at this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Sondra. Sorry, Lynn, we might have to keep you till next week.
That's all right. It was just going to be a quick prayer request, actually, because there's what we call a private members bill. So it's not the government, but an MP is trying to put a bill forward to recognise Palestine as a state. But it's a Muslim MP. Hopefully, because it's a private members bill, it won't even
Won't
get.
go.
But
Okay.
if you could, if it comes to mind, please pray. It's due on the 24th of January.
Excellent. Thank you, Lynn.
And thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Sondra. And yes, it is time to go. So our closing prayer would be, Lord, please protect Israel, protect the decision makers, protect our friends in the US this week. We have people from Australia to pray over the whole event. Protect us as we come forth in our elections. But most importantly, wake up the average citizen, that they will start to understand what is happening and stand against hatred and bring in biblical values across Israel, across the US, and across Australia. Be blessed, Sondra.
Thank you. Thank you to all.